Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thanks a lot for having me. And first of all, thanks a lot for assigning the German to the Beer Deluxe stage. So I definitely feel quite home. Today, I want to talk to you about a topic I'm sure you all know. I mean, if you haven't lived in a cave for the last 12 months, you will know that we are at the beginning of a new interaction paradigm. You will know that first there were mouse and keyboards that allowed us to have personal computers. And then there were touch screens that allowed us to go mobile. And you all know that at the moment, we are at the beginning of a new interaction paradigm, like the way humans interact with machines through natural language. So it's no surprise that there was like a lot of hype about it, but sometimes I think it's worth to have a little reality check. And as of course you all know that the first waves have been chatbots, right? And they are the shiny, hot new thing. And in fact, everybody has one right now. And when I say everybody, I literally mean everybody. So you now have actually a chatbot for the Pope. So he's a busy man, of course. So in case you want to have assistance with your prayers or you want to share some feedback, the Pope is actually scaling his services through a chatbot today. But don't get me wrong, personally, I followed my own little hype curve on this. 1.5 years ago, I worked with one of our teams in Shanghai, and it was the first time that I saw WeChat in action and really realized the potential of messaging apps. So that led me to give a talk in June last year with the bottom line, pretty much chatbots are awesome. Then a couple of months later, after trying a couple of chatbots and interacting with some of them, I felt there's more to it. I feel that obviously the implications behind conversational experiences are far bigger and go way beyond the chat. So today, after trying even more chatbots, I pretty much think they suck. At least most of them. I know there was a workshop just before my talk, and I'm really looking forward to actually try all those chatbots. But in my opinion, they rarely strike the balance between utility and experience. And what I mean with that is that even if you don't have too complex instructions, and even if the subject matter is quite simple, like a weather chatbot, for example, I think things quickly get actually out of hand. So Poncho is probably one of the better bot examples. Really well-crafted copy, well-designed and witty personality. They even found a way to deal with abusive language by simply putting abusive users into a penalty box and refusing to talk to them for a couple of minutes so they can all cool down. So really great ideas, but seriously, a conversation across 2 screens just to understand the weather forecast for your local area? I mean, surely there are apps and websites that do a better job at this. So if you think about that, and if you think about the complexities of those interactions through conversations, I pretty much agree with Ted Livingston when he says, like, chatbots today are where the websites were in the mid-90s. So if your expectation is to create a chatbot that has a flawless conversation and communication with your customers, with your users, you might actually be disappointed. If you have a narrow use case that kind of works with predefined answers with codes, a chatbot might actually be quite right for you. And in fact, there are actually good examples, or a couple of examples that start emerging. For example, you can now play poker on Telegram. Right? It might not be the most beautiful interface, but when you want to play poker, you can pretty much do it instantaneously. Not downloading an app, not logging into the website, you literally send a message and you go. So as so many times in history, it might be again certain industries that leading the cutting edge of tech. For example, gambling, and then the second one is obviously the adult-only content distribution industry that you all know. At least my assumption is you do. But yeah, seriously, these kind of industries have always been pioneers in a certain area, especially when it comes to content distribution and especially when it comes to payment. Speaking of which, payment providers through messaging apps are actually now disrupting the former disruptors. I mean, Alipay was like a big thing when it came out in China, right? And now Tenpay, which is the payment system within WeChat, is actually gaining 40% market share. I mean, if you just look at it, only 3 years ago, that number was almost zero. So the bottom line really is regarding chatbots that I really encourage you to rather focus on the utility rather than the assistant. Don't try to make them human. There was actually a great article from Elizabeth McGuane, who works for Intercom, who described their experience designing their own chatbot. So she describes how they designed it, how they build it, and they ship it, and then there was almost zero adoption. No one wanted to use it. They tried different things, they relaunched it, but again, nothing really improved. Until they removed the name of the chatbot, and until they removed all the first-person pronouns in its statements. What happened in that moment is basically they simplified a weirdly personified machine and turned it back into a tool. Because the thing is with us humans, when we interact with a personal assistant, we expect that assistant to solve the problem for us, right? We hand over the responsibility. The thing is, when we interact with a tool, we stay in control. It's our responsibility to solve that problem. And the bottom line here is really think twice. If you really want to kind of build a chatbot, think twice. If you can actually build an assistant that solves all the complex problems for your users, or if you shouldn't rather kind of build a damn good tool that's accessible through a messaging app. Your customers and your users might actually be more forgiving when the tool doesn't work instead of having a useless assistant. Especially because they anyway know that there's not a human on the other side, right? And I mean, if they don't know in the first place, then they will pretty quickly find out. As scientists of the universities of Berkeley and Chicago found out, is people are actually more likely to infer a human creator when they hear a voice than reading a text message. Elements like pace, intonation, are actually really important things that convey human elements like thinking and feeling. Yeah? We make a pause when we think. Yeah? And in general, most people actually like listening to people who think before they speak. Right? The rest likes Donald Trump, as we now all know. But these are really important things. So think about it like pace, intonation. These things get lost within a textual conversation. So in fact, if you actually want to build an assistant, the voice-based devices and voice-based interfaces might actually be the better approach for you. The device over here on the right, I'm not sure if everyone knows that, but it's basically Mattel's Aristotle. And the interesting thing is that these devices start now to share the same kind of platforms. Aristotle basically works on the Amazon Echo platform. The difference is its target audience are kids. And I definitely don't want to get into any discussions if that's a device that belongs into a kid's room. That's a whole different topic. But their decision is really interesting from a technology point of view. The reason why they decided to create their own device using the same platform is that all those devices so far are targeted at adults, native-speaking adults. They have like well-structured English commands which they can understand and respond to. A 3-year-old is not capable of that. And neither am I, as you probably know by now. But the bottom line is, because it's shared on the same platform, they're now going to track language data from adults and from children, which is going to make the whole platform stronger as a whole. So I guess it's no surprise that the analysts predict a massive growth in the virtual assistant market. I mean, 15.2 million devices in the next 2 to 3 years. That's quite a big number. And personally, I don't necessarily agree. And the reason for that is, I mean, I'm not sure what your experience is with Amazon's Alexa or with Siri and all the others. But I'm trying. I'm really trying. I'm really trying to gather something out of it. But it seems like mostly are actually getting the same response. So, I mean, totally given, my pronunciation is probably not right, my grammar is slightly off, but I'm clearly not the only person with that problem. So why is that? Like, why do we get this response so many times? And the simple answer to that is data. It still requires heaps of data, heaps more of data than they were able to actually track so far. And because it's not only about natural language processing, it's not only about kind of understanding what we're saying, it's about really understanding what we're intending to do. And this brings me to a very interesting point. So if they don't have enough data yet to really understand us, then why do we have all this hype around chatbots, around AI? Alexander Wisner-Gross basically shared an interesting insight in his articles, and he said the breakthrough points that happen in AI and the algorithms that are used for those breakthrough points usually already exist. So the average time that elapses between an algorithm that is invented and its use for an AI breakthrough is 18 years. On the other hand, the time that elapses between structured data sets that are available and the AI breakthrough is less than 3 years. For example, in 2011, when IBM's Watson won Jeopardy, it basically used a mixture of experts algorithm that was already published 20 years before. But the data that was used to train Watson for his kind of Jeopardy competition were basically 8.6 million documents that were published on Wikipedia, Wiktionary, Project Gutenberg just the year before that, just in 2010. So clearly, data is the key to breakthroughs. But this kind of data, this kind of structured data and labeled data is really expensive to create. And it's also really expensive to have all the computing power to train the machines to kind of have all those insights. So the question is, like, who can afford this? And in my opinion, and I'm really happy to be challenged on this, but in my opinion, this will be left to the big guys. The good news is, though, Google and co, they're going to solve the problem for us. They're going to solve natural language processing and processing human instructions for us. And if you look at all those services like Facebook with AI, etc., you can already see the building blocks of something that eventually comes as a service. So if you think about building your own kind of conversational experience, building your own AI machinery in the background, don't waste your effort and your money on cracking the NLP element. Don't crack the natural language processing. There are definitely more important things for you to look at. So if those big guys are meant to solve the problem for us, I guess the question in the future, I guess the question is, where are they now? And Fernando Pereira basically said, described our current moment in time as a tipping point. Right? So if you've kind of followed the latest releases of Google, if you think about the Google Home device, if you think about Google Hello, the AI-empowered messaging app, these are all powered by something Google calls the assistant. That's basically the AI layer in the background. And Pereira would probably be the first to admit that the natural language processing, the decision making that the assistant is capable of is far from great. But they figured it's just good enough. They figured it's good enough now to be released to get some people to continue to talk to it. Like, not everybody will like Google Home, not everybody will continue to use it, but some people will. And every time, basically, the Google Home device or Google Hello doesn't understand something, it creates a data point. And the more data points accumulate around a certain topic, the more the people know which areas to investigate in and what to improve. So the question then obviously is where to start, right? So like, I mean, what can you do today that one day when all the big guys have solved the natural language processing, have kind of decoded the human instructions and basically have nailed the human-to-machine conversation. Like, what can a company do today so that it's prepared for its products, its services to be delivered through such an interface? And before we get into this, I think the first thing that we need to do is maybe demystifying AI a little bit. And just to say that up front, I'm not an AI expert. So if you are, please don't ask me any challenging questions while I'm still on the stage, okay? But this is pretty much like what I understand as an experience designer about AI at the moment. And what I understand is there are 4 main areas. There's perception, reasoning, learning, and planning. And unless you are building a self-driving car or any kind of really fancy thing, it's most likely that for most businesses and for most companies in the near-term future, it will all be around the learning element. It will all be about machine learning. So I guess for now and probably for the next 2 to 3 years, when you read about AI, you're mostly going to read about something that is related to machine learning. And within machine learning, I think there are 2 really interesting fields, especially as an experience designer. I think there are 2 interesting fields. One part is deep learning. So that's basically what's related to kind of perception tasks like image and speech recognition. Natural language processors kind of fall into this area. And at its core, it uses neural nets, neural networks, basically algorithms and data that connections between 2 data points. And those connections get stronger or weaker while the machine learns. So that's the technology part. That's something it's good to understand, but again, as an experienced designer, I'm not too interested in that. What I'm interested in is once those algorithms are in place and once the data is in place, how do we actually train the machine? How does that training process look like? And today I basically see 2 valid options for a company or a business. One thing is you hire a whole team, you look at a use case, you look at all the decisions that need to happen in that use case, all the exceptions, and then you code it all into the machine. That's obviously quite a laborious task and not very scalable as soon as use cases become complex and there are more of it. The alternative is you only kind of focus on the basic layer, like what's the basic decisions that the machine needs to understand, what are the basic data points that the machine needs to understand, and then you hand over to the machine and let it come up with its own decisions when new data points come in. And then you sit there and every time the machine makes a decision, you tell it, yep, that's right, or that's wrong. The cool thing about that is that if you design it in a clever way, you can eventually outsource that task to your customers, right? You need to, of course, you need to get the basics right, and you need to kind of add value to your customers' lives or to people's lives initially. But once you are beyond that point, you can actually ask your customers to make those decisions for you. Like, nope, that wasn't the right decision of that service, or yes, that was the right one. So first thing is, let's demystify artificial intelligence. Now the next thing is, like, again, where to start. Now that you have kind of said, like, okay, we focus on machine learning, on reinforcement learning, where to start? And I didn't kind of find a way to put it any more convenient, but essentially you need to get your own house in order, right? I mean, if you want to kind of train predictive machine learning algorithms, you have to start with the data that you have at hand today. And I think we're now kind of behind that big data gold rush a little bit. I think like companies now started to understand that it's not about having a lot of data, it's more about like actually having the right data, having the right qualitative insights. So where you probably have to start is being really nice to your analytics teams. Buy them coffee, buy them lunch, and then start to kind of work with them in terms of like what kind of data models represent your company best, right? The first step is usually clean up the data that you have. Like every client we're working with, they usually have like a pretty big mess with their data. So clean up the data, focus on the data models that are really relevant for your company to start a conversation with a person. Then pick a use case that's ideally quite narrow, where this data is actually relevant, where this data can add value to it. And ideally, use a use case where you still have the human in the middle, because what you definitely want to have is that when the machine doesn't know any further, when the system doesn't know what to do, it can escalate to a human supervisor to make the decision for it. And then once you have established these kind of basics, then you can look at that use case and actually plug it in to the machine to feed the system with ongoing data and live data that then can the machine use to kind of get trained, get better at what it's doing. So at the end of your house cleaning, there should be two things. Number one is you should be comfortable with your understanding of what's happening. And number two is you should start to understand why. And of course, this all is a team sport, right? And I'm not only talking about the analytics team. Like, this is really a team sport of like all the different departments coming together. And like with all cool things in life, there's a canvas for machine learning as well. And I think his name is Luis Dora from Papi.io, who invented that. And I think it's a wonderful tool to actually facilitate conversations within team, facilitate conversations within departments, to actually decide what do you want to do. I mean, AI sounds fancy, machine learning sounds fancy. It's basically every slide I see where you see like, oh, there's a complex problem to be solved. You just draw a box, say AI, and that, like, you know, magically is going to happen. So more often, like, once you ask people, like, okay, what do you want the machine to learn? It's just like, you know, yeah, just make decisions for me, but why? Right? And this is why I would think it's really important to start to facilitate conversations and to create a common understanding for that task within teams, amongst teams, sorry. So basically what the machine learning canvas helps you to do is agree on a goal. Why do you want to do that? Who is going to benefit from that? And then start to decide what do you want to learn and what do you want to predict? Like, what are the kind of decisions that you want to be informed for? And then most importantly, how do you evaluate? Like, how do you actually make sure that the results that are coming out are correct? Who's that person in your company who could actually validate what's coming out of the algorithm? Who's the person who understands the algorithm? And what are you going to do when things go wrong? Right? So, very important. So far, we basically have looked at chatbots and discussed the focus on utility versus an assistant. We have kind of discussed AI and the focus on machine learning and what you basically can do today. So the question obviously is, what's next? And I'm not going to stand here and tell you what's happening in 5 to 10 years. I think, like, I love those kind of utopian conversations and ideation, and we definitely can do that over a beer. But I'm really talking about like what's next in the next 2 to 3 years. Like, where are we going? And to me, it basically, from an experience design point of view, comes down to one single question. Are we heading towards a future with one single assistant, or with a team of multiple assistants that are highly specialized and focused on certain needs and behaviors? Maybe a combination of it? I don't think so. At the moment, I really feel we are actually heading at least into a near-term future of reticent little helpers. And there are actually already a couple of examples emerging. If you look, for example, at Google Allo, now you can actually have a conversation with your friends about going for dinner, and the assistant basically serves you the information about the restaurant with the ability to book a table straight away without even leaving the context of that conversation. Or Facebook Messenger, like powered by the deep text technology. Basically, the minute it kind of picks up that you're talking about getting a ride, it suggests you the functionality of and the integration of for a Uber ride or a Lyft ride, basically whatever service you have kind of connected to it. And I really think like this is where it's going. This is really elevating conversations between people. It's much more rewarding than focusing on a conversation with a bot or a machine. And I brought you basically 2 startup examples, which I personally really liked. The first one is Blend.io, which uses genies. Most importantly, they are so cute, which is probably why they're going to be really, really successful.
Yeah.
But Genie, basically, the way it works, it's an app that you can download and you can assign those bots or those genies to your conversations. So it can, for example, include a fantasy football stats into a group conversation with your friends. Or it can share the latest New York Times article in that conversation, in that group chat, to spark a new discussion point. If you think about like human conversations, they're actually so delicate, they are so complex, they can go off in 1,000 different directions. So instead of focusing on replacing that conversation by a bot, maybe you should focus on amplifying that conversation between people and amplifying those group dynamics. Another example is bazillion beings. And that's a really interesting one, obviously a way artfully presentation of those bots. At the core, it's basically a mashup of different services. But I think from a bot perspective, it's a really clever idea, because what it does and the twist it has is that all the bots that live on that platform share what they learn. For example, picking up on the restaurant booking example again, you can have a bot that organizes meetings with friends to have dinner. It learns about your favorite places, about your favorite times, etc. And then another bot might come up that kind of organizes your business meetings. But since both bots are, again, like a mashup of multiple bots, they might share the same kind of restaurant booking bot/service. But this service, this bot will already know your favorite places, etc. So those bots really kind of can get mashed up in multiple different combinations, while they still kind of learn and keep learning and knowing your preferences and sharing it further from bot for bot, whatever you might download in the future. So what I really want you to take away from today are 3 things. First, if you think about a chatbot, really approach it from a utility point of view rather than an assistant. Don't try to make them human. No, it's wasted effort. The second element is start at your own data, bring your house in order, clean it up, and really focus on the data that helps you to have a conversation, that helps you enhance a conversation. And third, think about being open, thinking about your products, your services, being open to be consumed by third parties outside of your own ecosystem. How would your product, how would your service look in a Google Allo, in a Facebook Messenger, within a group chat amongst people? Because this might be just the necessary evolutionary step that we have to take to get used to the fact that a machine is part of our conversations. And it might be just the necessary step for the machine to learn about the complexities and the delicateness of a human conversation. So instead of focusing on establishing a conversation between a human and a machine, maybe we should focus on enhancing conversations between humans. Thank you very much.